More with Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com. When are you headed? Are you going out for the whole big weekend? Are you going to try to milk some extra time in Southern California?
No, it's a business trip. I'll be out there Sunday night, game Monday, come back first thing Tuesday morning.
Are you doing the red eye? Do red eye still exist they used to?
And it would be tight, though, because it's a 5 o'clock game LA time, and the red eye is like 11.
Ooh, that is a little tight. Yeah.
I want to make sure that ESPN's readers and audience get the very best out of me, and not one that's rushing to get the red eye. And I don't even I know you were probably a big red eye guy.
I wasn't. I hated them. I would do it out of necessity sometimes, but I despised them.
I used to do them a lot when I lived on the East Coast because it's like a 5-hour flight and you can actually have time to sleep. But a red eye from L.A. to Minneapolis is like 3 hours. And by the time you fall asleep, it's time to get off the plane.
No, that's not good for sure. This is a question from Jim out of St. Paul. Does anyone know if the coach tried to calm Darnold down during the first half? Everyone could see he was amped. Eyes were dazed. Did he talk to him on sideline, tell him take a breath, relax, don't worry about making mistakes? Curious how a coach goes about that, and if we know how KOC in this situation handled it.
I don't know any details beyond the fact that they talked the entire game, like over the the intercom and out on the sidelines. And I think O'Connell tries to stay away from Darnold, like when the defense is on the field, to the extent that Josh McCown is the quarterback's coach and he's on the field with him. And so Josh, if anyone were to try to work on the psychological side of calming him down, or just pointing out the things that need to be done on the iPad or whatever, that would be more McCown than O'Connell.
We were talking about B-Flow earlier. He was speaking today on a number of different fronts, but he also, I think, confirmed interest in still becoming a head coach. I think he had a presser 2-3 weeks ago where it seemed like he reintroduced that thing, made a point of saying, I'm ready to try to do that again. And the latest information seems to be that the Giants have requested permission, and the Bears, Jets and Bears, and Bears, yeah. Giants obviously didn't fire their coach.
No, but those are the only ones we know about. He wasn't like confirming each individual one. What he said was, I said there's been reports of several, and I said, would you? Because to me, the interesting thing, like at least from the outside, is this lawsuit that he filed after he was fired by the Dolphins and he didn't get a job in that particular cycle, was that one of the things he alleged in the lawsuit is that the NFL sort of violates the Rooney Rule, or NFL teams violate the Rooney Rule that requires them to interview diverse set of candidates by doing what he called, or it's called, sham interviews, and basically just bringing you in for the sake of bringing you in, so that you're in compliance with the rule, and then go hire the
token interview,
the white guy you really want to hire. And so I asked him, are you just going to take all of these, just carte blanche, or are you going to try to assess whether these are like legitimate interest things? And he didn't really address the sham interview part, but he did say, I'm going to take all the ones that I'm offered. It's an honor to be, which is the right answer. And I think the right idea. Like if you're not really going to know, unfortunately, if it was a sham interview until you get into it and after you see, who they eventually hire. But beyond that, so he's going to, we know that, Chicago and the Jets have requested. So if they've requested, and he said he's going to do all of them, then he'll interview with those two. He can't do it by NFL rules until next week.
Right.
And then I asked him about, the obvious one to me is the Patriots. He spent the first 15 years of his career there. He got up to the point where he was basically the defensive coordinator before he went to Miami to be the head coach. And, he's from Brooklyn, and I think a lot of his family eventually made their way to New England when he was coaching there. And so he said, obviously going home, spent a lot of time there, and, he definitely had interest, but it's not up to him. And it sounded as though there has not been a request to this point from the Patriots.
The Jets also want to talk to Josh McCown.
Yeah.
Right? The Vikings quarterback coach. Does he strike you as a guy, he's obviously highly regarded, is he strike you as a guy who might catch somebody's eye right away, and that he doesn't have to take another step, that he might end up, even in this cycle, with a head coaching job?
It would be an upset, but I wouldn't rule it out. It's happened where there's been teams that have identified really promising up-and-coming coaches and know that they're eventually going to become a coach, and just decide to try to get him at that point. The interesting thing is, I think the Patriots had that experience with Gerard Mayo, who became the coach this year and was an up-and-coming guy that maybe hadn't done all the steps, and he was overmatched. And so you have to take that into consideration as well. Are you willing to live through those growing pains or not? But This isn't even going to be Josh McCown's first interview for head coach.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
Houston interviewed him before he'd really even started his coaching career, and so at least at the pro level, he'd been a high school coach. And so I couldn't rule it out, but it's a smart person to. I'm actually surprised there hasn't been more, and then maybe there'll be more once the head coaches get hired and offensive coordinator jobs come open. I wouldn't be shocked if he gets some interest there as well, but. He's, as much as we talk about this being a good place for quarterbacks, it's probably a good place for offensive coaches who are focused on quarterbacks as well. And he, in terms of the ground that he would have to make up to do that.
We were talking about Raiders right at the start of the show announced that they're firing their head coach. I think that's now 6 vacancies.
Okay.
And you look at the Raiders situation, you go, I don't know. I mean, how do you know? They've had so many quarterback issues. You've covered a lot of football, and you've covered a lot of hirings and firings, and certainly paid attention to this sort of thing. It does strike me sometimes as a little bit of a game that teams feel obligated to play, perhaps even before they really know what they have in that coach. And it feels like it's so often dictated by, well, what do they have available to them at the quarterback position? The Raiders haven't had much, right? No. They've had steps and starts and stops, and they've had injury issues, and they really haven't had much. Even in New England, I mean, one and done for Mayo. Maybe he was awful. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But you're back to, okay, they were doing a quarterback transition, but he obviously wasn't ready to walk in and dominate. So are teams sometimes kidding themselves when they make such an issue, put such an emphasis on, we're putting somebody else new in place, if they don't really have an answer, a succession plan at the quarterback position?
Sometimes, but it's a tricky deal, man, because sometimes they do mistake personnel problems or do blame personnel problems on the head coach, right, and take it out on him and start over in that regard and get another few years of hope. But there's also some teams that I think sort of robotically think the other way. Like you got to have patience. You got to let it play out. You can't just keep firing guys, every couple years. And that's verbatim what the Giants owner said yesterday when he was asked, why are you keeping the GM and head coach there when this awful season just happened? And why are you letting them potentially go get the next quarterback or whatever? Why are you not starting over? And he basically said, well, that's what we've been doing all this other time. And, after every 2 years, we've been firing people who hadn't worked. But those issues don't apply to now. The only way to do it is to make an independent evaluation of this particular coach. In the case of Gerard Mayo in New England, I think he was overmatched. It wasn't, he was not ready to be a head coach, and there was too much to be made up. I mean, it's just in terms of basic stuff that you need from the leader of the organization, he wasn't able to provide to them. And the Giants need to decide, do you think Brian Daboll as a coach, has the capacity to get better? Are you just giving him more time because that's what you think you need to be doing? So that's just as big of a mistake as not evaluating correctly a first-year head coach and Antonio Pierce or whoever else, because the record wasn't as good because of these other reasons that weren't directly related to him. Yeah,
you're right. It should be independent. Sometimes I'm wondering if it ends up being cloudy.
And we've seen right here that even with the quarterback situation, I don't know how many people thought Kevin O'Connell was coming into a great quarterback situation with Kirk.
True.
I mean, it is possible to elevate the quarterback, and that would be a reflection of the coach as well.
All right, one more break and one more segment with Seifert. I want to talk about a couple of other teams who will be playing this weekend as well, get his thoughts there on the playoff opening round, and a couple maybe final thoughts on Vikings versus the Rams Monday Night Football. Do you have a philosophy, Kevin Seifert, on red zone running and whether we don't scratch that itch enough, despite the fact that our calling card obviously all over the field is passing?
Well, two things. One, in this particular game, I did ask O'Connell, why didn't you run more? And he basically said, when they're playing single coverage against our receivers, that's our look to throw. And I got that. They have not, if you just go back and do the numbers from the start of the O'Connell era, that has not been something they do much. And when they've done it, they've not been very good at it. Yeah. Dalvin Cook was good at, even at the end there in that final year, which was O'Connell's first year, at finding a way to get into the end zone. But they've just not they're not. That's not what they do. And last year they would just kind of run battering ram into Alexander Madison into the middle sometimes, and he wouldn't really get much yards. And so we were looking up the stats today, and I think like their average goal to go run has like almost minus 1 yard.
On average?
Before first contact.
Right.
So in other words, like, it's not like these running backs are like, there's like wide open spaces to go to. So, but I thought, like, I wondered if like maybe getting Darnold out of the pocket, at least, and give, like, he's, on a bootleg or something
the old
different.
Kirk Cousins boot?
Where but he has you could see Sam Darnold like maybe running it in.
Big time. That's true.
So do we want, it feels like something that isn't fixed or changed over the course of 1 week to the next. I think that maybe is something to, in a broader sense, in the off season, as you pull apart your scheme and put it back together, is to say, like, is it good enough to just have great receivers and throw a lot of 5-yard touchdown passes, which they do, and they have Kirk Cousins, Nick Mullins, everybody, Sam Darnold, or do they need a better running option? And I bet they'll think the latter.
Is Jones healthy? Well, I mean, what brought him? Why was he late coming out? Was that just fluids? Was that like
it sounded
IV?
like, I mean, he's been dealing with his quad for a while, and like they're nursing him through it. He played all 17 games. He had a career high in rushing yards and carries. So he's answered the bell. He just, at this point in his career, is not going to be a 92% snap guy. He's going to need some time off, and that's why they have Cam Akers. I think Cam Akers pretty good backup running back at this point. Had that big run the other night, and but I do think the reason I know that the reason Jones came out on the field late in the third quarter is that he had been finishing up an IV.
Okay, that makes some sense. Anything else about this game or this team that you think is worth trying to squeeze in here before I ask a couple questions regarding other games this weekend?
No, the only other thing that came up today with the coordinators, and I put in my playoff report, we had to pick something that was a area for concern, and to me, it's the kicker. And so, like, I know we don't even want to go down the road probably of like kicking in this town and all that sort of thing, but just like
the game.
yes, and just independent of all that, just independent to this team. He was awesome the first half of the year. He got hurt, and he hasn't been the same since. He's not terrible. He's still making 50-plus yarders, and he's playing in a dome. Well, I call it a carport. There's open sides at SoFi Stadium, but it has the weather is not expected to be a factor for kicking. And then if they play the Lions again, they win this game, they play the Lions again, it's again indoors. And so you're not necessarily looking at some really difficult kicking situations, but it wasn't, and it's not just missing the field goals. I think he's 10 of 16. So he missed 6 of his last 16 field goals over the course of the regular season.
That's
considerable. But the kickoff was not them trying to be cute or trying to like bounce it and make it and pin them deep or something. Like it was supposed to be a ball out of the end zone, and he mishit it, and that cost him 3 points. And like, so again, we talked about this in the beginning, like rookie kickers, like the history of rookie kickers is that, there's a reason why so many of the kickers in the NFL are not with the original team they started with, because teams, they don't produce well as rookies. And so they committed to him. And he's not been terrible, but he's not been as reliable as he was in the first half of the season.
Should B-Flow be satisfied with the way his defense played on Sunday night?
2/3 of the way, maybe. Like they were playing beyond winning football. Like they held the team in the game for 2/3 of it before the Lions eventually pulled away. Were they going to do that anyway? Did the fact that the Vikings didn't put any pressure on the Vikings offense didn't put any pressure on the Lions offense by scoring a lot. Like if the Vikings had gone up 21-7 or whatever,
who knows?
Like, does that change at all? What that they did get up 10-0, I think, in the first game, and the Lions came back, but it ended up being a close game. So if you go by the theory of momentum and butterfly effect, and one thing leads to another, if the Vikings offense had scored more early, would the Vikings defense have fared better near the end, or would the game have been closer near the end? Quite possibly, yes.
Yeah, there's any question. For last quarter, Lions sort of did what they do.
Yeah.
Maybe they were going to do that anyway. Yeah. I don't know. But if you take advantage of your opportunities, then at least I think you can live with the possibility. Maybe that tightens up Detroit a little bit, or it changes, like you said, the butterfly effect changes a lot of things because the opportunities most assuredly were indeed there. I'm curious to get your view on Green Bay is going to Philly.
Yeah.
I think that's a Sunday game, isn't it?
Sunday, 3:30.
And I keep hearing this from people that they think Green Bay's dangerous, man. They can go there, play loosey-goosey. They're the team. If you just kind of let them go, they might surprise you. And I think I felt that until I watched them against us and even a little bit against the monsters, the Midway Bears, the other us's. Now, that was a weird circumstance, but it was nevertheless not a great performance. Neither of those were what I call tight performances. So do you buy that? Now, I guess there's an open question about Hurts, but in terms of his availability. But if he's there available, I don't see Green Bay in that situation. Am I underestimating?
No, and I don't know if it's like institutional memory. Like I remember the year that the Packers won the Super Bowl, which was 2010, I think. Like they started off as the 7th seed, and they went to Philly, I think was their first game, and they upset the Eagles, and that started them on their run. And like I don't know how many people are like connecting that and like or not, but like has happened. It's entirely different teams. Jalen Hurts is still in the concussion protocol. I think there's a lot of optimism that he'll eventually be cleared by the independent doctor and that he'll be able to play in this game. He's missed 2. I don't know if that means he's rusty or not, but if they're at full strength, based on what we've seen from the Packers lately, that would be a pretty big upset for them to win. Yeah,
I'd be surprised. I mean, I guess you could say Love gets on a little bit of he's a streaky QB, makes some plays, and then maybe Hurts isn't 100%. He plays, but he's not 100%. So we'll have the rematch with the Lions that Campbell suggested in shaking hands with the Vikings head coach. If basically, obviously, we have to win, and the Eagles win, and Tampa Bay wins, correct? Then we would play in Detroit for the second week.
Yeah, because they'd be the lowest seed remaining.
Right.
Yep. And then that would mean the Eagles and the Bucks would play in the other divisional game.
Yeah, and then eventually, I guess it depends on what Philly does. I always have that phobia about the Vikings playing in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Well, I mean. There's a reason for it. I mean, it's like I'm trying to remember the last, like they even going back to one of the Tice years they played in the playoffs there. I think the year after the game after the mooning, they beat Green Bay, Randy Moss, and then everybody's fired up and they go to Philly, and they did not win there. And then Philly came here once in the Brad Childress era, and Tavares Jackson was the quarterback, and the Eagles won here. I'm trying to think the last time the Vikings beat the Eagles, period.
Well, and they do have a good offensive end. Their lines are good.
Yeah.
Right? They're not a perfect team.
So there's like a long history of lack of success from the Vikings against the Eagles in the playoffs. And this particular team is a tough matchup for everybody, if they have their starting quarterback. I mean, they were 13-4 this year.
9-5, a 952 guy wonders whether there's any chance that the Vikings were playing possum against the Lions, anticipating the possibility of a rematch. And we held some stuff back for the rematch. That seems far-fetched to me.
Probably not. Yeah. If they were going to do that, they probably would have pulled their starters once. I mean, if you might as well just totally commit to that bit and pull your starters and keep them healthy. But they seem like they were still trying to win until the end.
Yeah, I think that would be I would say that's a little bit of a stretch. You mentioned worries. You mentioned your number one worry. What you wrote about was the kicker. Regarding from scrimmage, the offense and defense, what's at the top of the list that could trip up the Vikings that you think they have to avoid?
I mean, now we have to add like pressure Darnold, and just the Darnold in general. I mean, he does need to rebound, and that's definitely a worry. The other thing is that they did not get hardly any pressure on Matthew Stafford. I'm not really sure why. I need to dive into that more. But in that first game, I think Stafford, they didn't blitz him very much, and he got pressured on 8% of his dropbacks. So he had plenty of time to pick them apart.
Yeah.
And like I said, the one time that he did get pressure, he got away from Grenard and threw a touchdown pass. And so, you have to pick and choose, because if you just think you're going to blitz the old man, he has the ability to dice it. But I also think you can't let him pick you apart either. And so that is another concern.
Yeah, for sure. The KOC should go watch the first couple Lions possessions, see what consistently running the ball for 2 yards accomplishes. Collinsworth said, here comes a play action deep shot soon. Within 5 seconds, there was a shot over the middle, sucking Cashman up to play the run. KOC runs play action after throwing 6 or 7 plays. Nobody is buying it.
I actually disagree. The analytics show, the research shows that play action is effective whether not
you have set everything up.
You're running. Mm-hmm. You don't need to set it up because unless you're never going to run and you don't have play action with nobody in the backfield probably doesn't work. But there's lots of evidence to think that play action success is pretty independent of whether of the volume of running plays you use. SoFi,
you've been there, right?
Yeah,
I assume
earlier this year.
Lovely place, overrated, underrated. What do you make of SoFi?
Well, it's weird. Like I said, it's the same kind of roof as the U.S. Bank has, the clear sort of plastic thing, but it's more of a carport. NFL actually considers an outdoor stadium because it has open sides and just this roof over top of it. So it doesn't happen often in Los Angeles, but they had a thunderstorm one year and they had to delay the game because of lightning, because NFL rules classify it as an outdoor stadium. It's the LA market is the Rams were there before, they were gone for a while and they came back, and it's not going to be like it was at Ford Field. It might be, might be loud, but it's not going to be Ford Field. It's not going to be Seattle. It's not the rabid. They just haven't developed the rabid fan base that some of those other more established teams have.
Are we going to buy a bunch of tickets again? Did you? Were the ones we bought, were the folks noticeable behind the bench?
You could see them at the start of the game, at least.
Yeah, yes.
And so, but that was a fun story, and everybody took it for what served their purpose. Vikings fans thought it was a great idea to for goodwill, and also to just, whether it's even just for TV a little bit, to have some Vikings fans behind the Vikings bench, and Lions fans took it as, well, they got to bribe their fans to get them to come to a game.
By the way, somebody's saying we're 0-4 against the Eagles in the postseason.
Okay.
Which sounds right. I
wasn't able to come up with a win in my head.
It might well be true. Safe travels to Los Angeles. Thanks for coming in, as always. We'll chat next week.
Okay,
Either way.
Yep.
Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com. Louis always joins us on Tuesday, generally about 5:30, but he is going to come on next to talk puck. That's next. Luigi here on
Well, she sneaks around the world from Vienna to Carolina. She's a sticky-fingered filcher from Berlin down to Belize. She'll take you for a ride on a slow boat to China. Tell me, where in the world is
Lou Nanne?
Well, he's on the phone. He's brought to you by our good friends at Kemp's. As always, we appreciate their fine patronage, and hope that you support Kemp's as well. I know Louis joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Are you in any place tropical this week?
Well, I'm back in Florida. It's not tropical. It's 62. Ooh. I was in Ottawa yesterday.
Oh, you poor thing.
For the World Junior Tournament. It was about 10 there, so I was really looking forward to getting back to warm weather.
You poor thing.
And we got hit with that cold snap.
62, you said?
Today and 64
cold snap.
tomorrow.
64 tomorrow. Man, that's brutal. That's rough.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Does your car start? Do you need a jumper cables or anything? You getting your car started?
I was wondering about that.
Does anybody have a heated garage in Florida? Probably no need, I'm guessing.
I know that many people use a trickler because they leave their cars here, in the summer.
Yeah.
And you got to keep them started. I actually kept my car for a couple of years in Harry Sinden's house and used a trickle charger on it, so that
nice.
Yeah. So,
did he charge you?
About the battery.
Did he make you pay a little stipend or anything? No.
Pretty kind.
That's nice.
Kind guy.
That's good. That's good. Well, I'm sure you've done a favor. You did a favor or two for him over the years too. So I'm sure that.
We all help one another.
That's what I figured. You mentioned World Juniors. Give me an update on what's going on there.
Dan, Minnesota had a great presence in the World Junior. First of all, on a team, which is most important. We had about 40 people, a delegation up there getting ready for the transfer next year because Minnesota's going to have the World Junior Championships, and the Wild people, Kelly McGrath and Wayne Peterson. Well, all the different Mariucci people, everybody that has do something. We're there to see how it was functioning and how it could run better. And Wendy Blackshaw had all our people up there. But the really good thing to see was Minnesota had a great presence in the championship that the U.S. won. First of all, they had two Gophers on the team, Brody Zimmer and Oliver Moore, who played. They both played very well, and Zimmer and I don't know how to pronounce the kid's name, Beam, right? I think it's Beam. The draft choice that the Wild made last year from,
yes,
and I have to say from Denver, but the two of them connected on the play that eventually set up the game winner in overtime. And Beam's not an ordinary player. I have to tell you, the Wild have really struck gold with this kid. The way he could skate and handle the puck, he teamed up with Cole Hudson, who will be a draft pick this year, and Hudson actually won the most valuable player in one of the games and the best defenseman for the tournament. Although I didn't think he was any better, and he certainly wasn't any better than Beam, but he got more points. He led the tournament scoring, so he'll be the big high draft this coming year. But those two kids were dominant on defense, and the way the Beam handles the puck, moves the puck, how smart he is, the way he skates, the Wild have struck gold. Outside of Celebrini was the first pick, and he's got 13 goals as the first pick, and he'll win the Calder this year in the NHL. But after that, I don't see any pick that's maybe better than that kid. The kid in Philadelphia, the Russian Mikhailov, he's going to be great too. But this defenseman is, Wild got to be laughing about this one.
I've got a history question for you, and then we'll talk some Minnesota Wild as well. Dan Minnesota reminds us that on this date in 1980, the North Stars beat the Philadelphia Flyers 7-1. 7-1. In front of a record crowd of 15,962 at the Met. The win, of course, snapped, as you well know, Philly's 35-game unbeaten streak, which to this day is still the longest in the National Hockey League. Maybe sometime in the last few decades we've talked about this, but not in a while I don't think we've talked about it. What do you remember about that night?
Well, first of all, that streak won't be broken because in those days we had no overtime. And when you say unbeaten streak, there
a
number of overtimes in there.
Right.
But I will tell you that night I won't forget because it was such a big night. I even still have the picture of the building, the players on the ice of that evening because it was something special. And it wasn't just a win; it was just a drubbing. We beat them 7-1 is right. And Pat Quinn really had a terrific team, and he did a fantastic job with them. But it was just time for them to lose, and we hit on all cylinders that night. And I want to tell you, the crowd was like a Stanley Cup final crowd that we had. A year later with the Islanders, how noisy it was, and it was the same thing that night. And there was great anticipation going into that game. We felt we could win. We were anxious to win, and you keep talking about that they're due for a loss, and we're a team that could do it. And it was a special night. It was a special night, and I don't know if our team during the regular season played a better game.
Yeah, that's a good memory for sure. Let's also talk about the current Minnesota professional hockey team, the Wild. They're still dealing with injuries. Kaprizov, Spurgeon, Middleton were all out, and they did very well on this little East Coast run as well, right, against the Capitals and then the Hurricanes, 4-0, 13-5-3 now in the past 21 meetings. So give me kind of an update on how and why you think this team is, to this point, done a pretty good job, it appears, of coping with a pretty significant stretch of injuries.
Well, I'd have to say better than a pretty good job. I'd have to say it's one that no one ever expected because they've had unbelievable losses. When you look at their lineup compared to others in the league, the quality of players that they lost, and they still maintain this kind of record. And you just mentioned going into Washington. You realize Washington is the one team ahead of them, and they beat him at home. And I think that game I was watching, we were down 2 and came back to win it. Wilson scored a goal, was called back. That might have been a difference for Washington, but the Wild never stopped. And the guy, Rossi's just risen to the top, of course, the way he's playing with Kaprizov. But it's got to be the discipline, because if you look at the stats, the way the Wild are goals for, goals against, they're way down compared to where they're standing. They're about 11th in goal differential in the league, yet their overall percentage is probably 5th best. And goals for, they're down around 7th in the league. Goals against, they're maybe 5th. It's the discipline that they've maintained when they're shorthanded like that, of not giving up a lot, and at the same time, they've been very fortunate their goaltenders have played really well when they had to be. Both Gustafsson and Fleury, they've been as consistent, well, it's like 2 years ago for the way they're playing. And then you get the guys that have reached the levels that I'd have to say going in, nobody expected the other guys were going to play like this. When you lose a Kaprizov and a Spurgeon, and they had Brodin out for quite a while, and Zuccarello, the guys that they lost, and then on top of that, you had Hartman in just a horrific drought. He's got 1 goal in 20 games, and he's a guy usually, I really like and count on him to not only be physical but to come up with points, and he was struggling there. And you get Rossi coming to lead the way, and some of the kids, the defense has been really crucial, and it was a great pickup for them to get Chisholm on top of that. But it's a team job, and Heinz has done an outstanding job of coaching these guys.
I don't remember which coach attempting to sort of scout or characterize the Wild success. That's a lot of what whoever that was, it'll come to me in a minute. That's what you're addressing, right? It's boring, but it basically said they don't screw up much, and it sounds like faint praise, but as you well know, over the course of a season, it's not. If you can be true to your, whatever your discipline is, or really whatever your formula is, and the old not give the other team, extra opportunities because of your own vulnerabilities, you're halfway home, right? You can at least give yourself a chance to compete most nights.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And there is a saying, and you've heard it 1,000 times, take care of your own zone first, and everything will take care of themselves. Well, it's easy to say, but really tough to do. And really tough to do when some of your best defensemen like Brodin and Middleton and Spurgeon have missed so much time. And yet, these guys have, no matter who goes out there, they have been very diligent in their own zone. If you look at the quality of shots, I think is a real major factor in everything. We talk about the goaltending, which has been, really spectacular for them. But I want to see, if you go back to a chart of where the shots are getting to the Wild net and the second and third opportunities other teams are getting, you're going to find out that they're giving up very, very little second, third, fourth opportunities compared to most teams. And the shots are from the side, the perimeter. They're not getting as good quality shots. So the defense in their own zone has been extremely diligent of keeping the pucks on the outside and the shots on the outside. And they've done a good job along the boards, battling for pucks, not only battling for pucks, being able to deflect them out or tip them out when they're undermanned. And the team taking care of their own zone like that is one of the reasons why their goals against is at the top of the league. They're 1-2 in the league.
And Middleton allegedly is close. I saw the Heinz quote. Whether that's tomorrow or not, or today or not, I'm not sure. He says, but he seems to be getting closer, and it sounds like on Kaprizov. Excuse me. It's the classic case of we're just being cautious that if, like, we were in the middle of a playoff series, he'd probably be playing now, which makes sense, right? I mean, this is a time of year, especially with their success and their record, where you're better off erring on the side of caution.
Well, I want to believe that, but I have to tell you, ever since last year, remember it was the game against Winnipeg, and I believe it was Dylan that sort of fell on him awkwardly, and Kaprizov almost went like into a split where you think his legs are going to be. It reminded me of Bob Hope in one of the movies when the Indians had tied one leg to one tree and one to the other, and then they snapped the rope, and I think his body's going to rip in half. And ever since I saw that thing, I've always had concern of did they ever do significant damage to his groin? And then he came back, and it didn't look like anything happened. But now, when he starts to deal with a groin problem, and it's going this long, and I hope the reason he's not playing is because they just don't want to rush him into it, and that there's not any ongoing groin damage, because the way he skates and how powerful he is, but the way he's gone down and some of the hits, it just hurt me to see, the way his legs were spread, and I just hope that there's not severe groin damage, and I'll feel a lot better when I see him back in the ice skating all the time and not having to deal with this problem again, because groins are no fun. I know that is a fact, and I want to tell you, it's the one thing I worry about with him, and I just I'll be happy when he's on that ice again.
Where are you on Rossi? Because the ongoing joke was he was on the trade block for, starting the season on the block. It's difficult for me to believe he still could be, if indeed he ever was. But what's your view on him right now? Would you be stunned if he doesn't finish the season in Minnesota?
I'd be stunned if he didn't not only finish the season here, but didn't sign a very nice contract for 4 or 5 years, because one thing about Rossi, at first, you remember he had myocarditis, which is the second biggest killer of kids, that disease, and he couldn't play that year. So then it took time to come back, and then after that he tried again, and he had no points in 16 games, but he went down and he come back, and ever since that time that he's been growing. But this year he's matured, and when you think about Rossi, you want to think about one main thing. Rossi led the OHL in scoring. When you lead a league like that in scoring, that means you've got the capability to score. You're not a flash in a pan. It's not, something that just happened and you go away. To be able to do that, you have to have the capability of producing. And he's got that capability, and he's grown into it. He's improved his strength, he's improved his skating, but he's always had the head and the hands. And now when you put them together, you've got a quality player. And even if you, say, get one of the top-notch centermen in free agency coming up this year, and you got Eric Sinek, who's a fantastic two-way centerman, even if he's number 3, what a number 3 producer you have there.
Right.
I don't see where you're going to go and get something even more without giving up a heck of a lot. And why would you do that when you already have those other 2 opportunities? One, to sign a guy it's a free agent. Second, you already got Eric Sinek there.
Well said. Let's run through a bunch of texts here in the remaining minutes. Luigi joining us, brought to you by Kemp's. Are the juniors next year going to be played at both the X and Mariucci with the 2 different sized rings?
Yeah, you have to remember the Mariucci rink now was
rinks, I should say.
Shrunk.
Yeah.
It shrunk. So now you're only, I think,
that's true.
It might be 9 feet different, not 15. So it's considerable difference. And by the way, the Europeans, a lot of them still playing that size rink. Yes, they are going to be playing at 2 different size rinks. And I think now somehow I think that because we won, and this is second year in a row, Canada hasn't even made the quarterfinals, semifinals, and it's like morning up there. They might be in our division, which means all the games would be at the XL for Canada and the U.S. But I think there's probably going to be something tried afoot to put Canada in 3M at Mariucci, because they'd be such a formidable draw there. It would really help the ticket sales that way. I personally would say you might as well keep them both at XL, because you got a bigger stadium to fill there. It might hurt 3M at Mariucci, but it sure helped the XL. And The hockey, I was watching the game, and they don't play like juniors. I want to tell you, it is such a thrill to watch these kids play at that level. It's amazing. It's going to be a big treat for the state of Minnesota to be hosting this.
I think we've talked about this before, but I'll try it again. This is from 612 Guy. How does Louis feel about Ovechkin on the on approaching the Gretzky goal record? Are you okay with that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think it's okay. Remember, we had the shortened season, the lockout more than half a season. If you didn't have all that, Ovechkin would have already broken the record. So, and he should definitely do it, if not this year, next year. But he could even do it this year. And it's great. Gretzky's okay with it. I'm okay with it.
This is from 651. Would you ask Louis if he agrees that, yes, we are a really good hockey team this year, but when I look at just the size of some of our players and the way our team is built, I still do not see us being a deep-run playoff team. What do you think?
Well, I really like the difference that we made. We added size on defense, and that, when you got Middleton and Zach and, Brodin's got height. He hasn't got weight, but he's got the leverage. He's got height. We got more size back there than we had on defense. So I'm feeling good about that. Size is more important for me in the defensive area. And we got some big size up front. We got a number of good size forwards when we're healthy. So I don't think size is as much a question as it would have been in the last few years that was bothering me. I'm feeling better about that. I like the way the guys with size play too, because our forwards, the guys with size, they take the body. They all take the body right now. Yeah, if you don't take the body, you're not going to play. If you miss checks, you're out of there, because they've got enough guys with enough depth to play that way.
Austin in Apple Valley mentions it might not be on our docket, but can you ask Louis how the NFL brings back the big presence of outdoor hockey games after season low ratings in this year's game between St. Louis and Chicago? I think that was at Wrigley, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I have to tell you, they will bring it back because they're still going to draw. But I was surprised at that selection. They were basically selling the field more than the teams.
Yeah, good point.
And Bedard, who had a great year, but he hasn't had such a great year this year. And I think I have to believe that they're going to have better teams going forward, because that's really important if you want to get those ratings back up.
We mentioned early, we talked about on this date in 1980, the Stars' big 7-1 shellacking of the Philadelphia Flyers, who had a 35-game unbeaten streak, still the longest in the NHL. And a couple folks have said, let me read a couple of these. This is from 612. This is Joe from Omaha/Woodbury. I was at that game, got Bobby Smith's autograph. My seat was up next to the press box. Steve R. writes, I was also at the game. Place was buzzing an hour before the game. So much fun. So we did find a couple people who were there, maybe more, listening, but it was interesting to hear from a couple of those folks, because that's one of those games that, if you have some memory of it, it's going to stay with you.
Oh, yeah, and a lot of teams don't have those kind of memories. Those are special games. When you're ending a streak, 35 games is almost half a season.
That's
those
right.
days, I don't think we were even playing 82. We were still playing 80 at the most, maybe 76. So that's a streak that, as I said, will never be replicated in this day and age, because you got overtimes.
Much appreciated. Great stuff as always, and good to catch up. We both feel bad for you that you're dealing with that vicious 62-degree temperature in Florida. But we hope you can. Thoughts and prayers, I guess, is the best way for us to put it.
I got one of those foot heaters around.
There you go.
The links Louis goes to grow the game in Florida.
Yeah, that's it.
The links that he goes
Somebody's got to do it, right?
deal with that
does.
weather. Yeah.
If not you, who, right?
You got it.
We'll send you a
I
jacket.
haven't seen you guys, so send me a picture, please.
It's a deal. We'll do it. Thanks, Luigi.
All right. See you. Thanks.
We'll talk next week. Lou Nanne joining us a little earlier than usual, which means we're wide open the rest of today's program. We are out early again today at 6:10 this evening. for reasons we'll get into later. But we do have time next for the top 5 at 5.
Minnesota Wild, Gopher basketball, if you stayed up for it. Wolves with a big change, and Daniel Jones to discuss.